All right, well, let's take a few minutes just to meet each of my three guests initially, and we'll start with you, Jim Rogers, investment guru. You chair your own company, Rogers Holdings, and you've written legendary books, most notably perhaps Investment Biker, in which you wrote about a ride around the world in the early 90s on a Harley.
BMW.
BMW, I do apologise. And your latest one is called Street Smarts.
Street Smarts, Adventures on the Road and in the Markets. Rush to your nearest bookstore.
Now, what are you investing in at the moment?
Oh, my main investments at the moment are agriculture and currencies, U.S. dollars, in fact. To my astonishment, I'm optimistic about the U.S. dollar, which I've been terribly pessimistic about for years.
Yeah, because you up and left the U.S. You've settled in Singapore.
Yeah, we
now.
moved to Singapore 6 years ago. Yes, I am still an American citizen, but we live in Singapore.
What's made you turn around your view of the United States? Because you were kind of Mr. Down on the West, up on the East.
I'm still down on the West. I'm still down in the U.S. The U.S. is the largest debtor nation in the history of the world, Evan, in the history of the world. But we're about to have a lot more currency turmoil. The Japanese are printing money. The English are printing money. The Europeans are printing money. So in times of turmoil, rightly or wrongly, people go to the U.S. dollar. They think it's a safe haven. It is not a safe haven, Evan, but people are going to go there. So I went there too.
Which brings me to another point I wanted to ask you about, Jim, because you're somebody who looks at fundamentals when you invest. You worked with George Soros. Does it ever amaze you how few people in finance invest that way? They're all so-called momentum investors. They're not thinking about where the money should go. They're looking at charts and extrapolating lines, or their computers.
A lot of it is computerized now. There's instant computerized trading. Oh, you're exactly right. The bulk of the volume on the New York Stock Exchange, for instance, is the kind of investor you're talking about. But that leaves opportunities for people who are willing to find the things that nobody else is looking at, and perhaps find, hidden gems and hidden investments.
Is actually that we are in the fifth technology revolution. There has been four before. The fifth technology revolution is all about ICT. It's about actually using the technology in a totally different way than it was invented. And think about, we invented all the networks. We got some 5 billion people having a mobile phone, and basically was one service. That was to call each other. The only thing you know for sure, the next 10, 15 years, that's the smallest service there is in the networks, because connectivity is data, and a lot of other things will happen in networks. So we're creating something we call the network society, where anything that benefits from being connected will be connected in the future. And we started to do predictions on it. And we have a lot of predictions. We believe by 2020 it's going to be 50 billion connected devices. We have pretty good grip on how many people that are actually going to have a mobile phone 5 years from now, how many are going to use data services 5 years from now.
There are 50 billion connections but there are only 6 billion people.
Absolutely.
What are we going to connect?
Yeah, I think you should start thinking about how many connected devices do you have?
Yeah, it's just...
I think that in my home I would easily come up to 15.
I wouldn't use me as an example.
But I would use me.
I have a telephone, I have a computer. I don't know
TV is connected?
TV. I don't have a TV.
Okay.
I have a radio.
Oh, I have a radio.
I listen to BBC every day.
Your power meter is going to be connected one day, if it's not already. You're going to have roads, light poles being connected in order to manage electricity.
The trend is sort of hyper-connectivity, and we've only just started with our smartphone, is your
We're
point.
in the brink of moving into the second phase of this technology revolution. We've not seen it really yet.
Yeah.
What's the price of your stock?
My price of my stock today is around 78 Swedish kronas per share.
I might call up my broker.
Here's the... okay, so that's a very interesting trend. Dorothy, what are the trends that are sort of big in your
when you asked the question and you gave your answer, I found myself thinking about it. I mean, one of the most challenging things at Drax has been that we took the decision, actually soon after I joined, that our strategy would be about carbon abatement. And that's because there's a site in the UK, we're the largest carbon emitter in the UK by a factor of 2. We're also twice as big as anyone else, but that's it. But it's not a good thing to be the largest carbon emitter. And we decided, for carbon abatement, for sustainability, we needed to find a low carbon solution. When we did that, the carbon market, European carbon market, had only just been introduced. And maybe if I give you some numbers, because actually that was 7, 8 years ago. Now we're implementing it, and actually I think my board and shareholders are thrilled. And the reason is because our carbon costs are soaring. Last year our carbon bill was about 90 million. This year it would be close to 200 million.
Sorry, this is because you have to pay for the right to pollute. But I thought the carbon price had collapsed and you could buy carbon emission permits
but the piece
for
of
nothing.
information you're missing, Evan, is that the UK has introduced the highest carbon tax in the world, or it will become the highest carbon tax in the world. So we buy those traded emissions. What we also have to pay is this tax on top. Starts at £5 this year. By the time we get to 2020, it's over £40 a tonne. And that is very substantial. When we burn biomass, we don't pay that because biomass is carbon neutral. When we burn coal, cost is very high.
So even though biomass is 3 times the price of coal, because you don't have to pay the tax, it will be competitive.
By the time we get to 2020,
well,
it will
that's what I'm
start
asking.
becoming competitive. Right
Because
now, and actually not quite even at 2020. 2020 it probably would be.
Okay, so you're continuing the bet basically on shifting towards renewables, decarbonising, and moving in that
Sound
direction.
investment strategy.
Yeah. Look, Jim, this brings us to, because we've had hyperconnectivity, we've had moves towards decarbonisation. Your big trend, Jim, just to sort of kick this off.
Oh gosh, the big trend.
Because I think yours is to do with raw materials, commodities.
I'm extremely optimistic about commodities going forward. I'm wildly optimistic about agriculture.
You mean prices going up of these things? I just want to be
It's
clear.
going to be scarcity.
You have to remember that the listeners don't think prices going up is any grounds for optimism.
Well, I'm very optimistic about agriculture as a profession. It's going to be one of the most exciting economic sectors in the world for the next 20 or 30 years, partly because it's been a disaster for the last 30 years. Nobody has gone into agriculture. The average age of farmers in America is 58. In Japan, it's 66. The highest rate of suicide in the UK is in agriculture. In Canada, it's the oldest. They're the oldest in recorded history. I mean, farmers are dying out and retiring, and at the same time, no young people are going into agriculture. In America, more people study public relations than study agriculture. I mean, I don't know what you need to know. There's not going to be any farmers soon. And I'm not very smart, but I like to go where there's not much competition. And my goodness, I bet none of you know anybody who you went to school with who became a farmer. That's because they all went into telecommunications
and to PR. But
I have some old friends,
they became very, very high productivity. So you only needed 20 to cover half the land mass of the United Kingdom. I mean, isn't that it? I mean, it's so high.
That is part of what happened. Yes, part of what happened. But basically, prices have been so low for the long time. Sugar today is down 75% from where it was in 1974. Do you know anything that's down 75% in price since 1974? I suspect you don't know many things, if any.
Consumer electronics.
Well, okay, yes. Consumer electronics, yes. Okay.
Because they have more slow.
Right, and the second?
No, that was the only one I came up with right now.
Not electricity.
No,
Electricity.
Okay, well, we've discussed some long-term trends, the ones you're working towards at the moment. Put those aside for a minute. Let me ask how you go about coming up with a long-term trend, the process of forecasting or scenario planning. What do you do? Is it around judgment? Is it data? How do you come up with the kind of making the bet or the forecast that you're building your company's future on?
Over time, at least in my experience, is that if you bring the right type of people around you, diverse enough, different backgrounds, different places from all around the world, different insights, you get to a very decent amount of data in order to take the decision.
Do you have a little futurology department in
Absolutely,
Ericsson
all the time. On every topic that is difficult.
Oh, on every topic that you have people whose job is to sit and think about the future.
You need to be be worried about what's going to happen tomorrow.
Why I think it's so difficult for all of you, it's not extrapolating the kind of growth rate of population of the Chinese market, or extrapolating Chinese GDP. That's actually relatively easy, and so even that gets off course. But you're trying to ask what might happen, what scenario might occur that we haven't thought of yet, and that's.
But nearly all those projections where you're just extrapolating turn out to be wrong 15, 20 years from now. Very few of them.
I think that's why when you make any decision, there are two things you do. One is you have a good enough debate that you really think you've understood it. And sometimes you just have to make what you call a bet. Sometimes you just have to. But the second is you actually, I think, need to go through the analysis of what the different scenarios actually could pan out. And you have to look at what the scenarios could be.
So it's not about precise. It's not a spreadsheet in which you extrapolate numbers and have a formula.
Yeah.
It's about a scenario, building a scenario.
Or a
in your
selection
head.
of scenarios. Because there's no one solution for most things when you're trying to work out how you go forward.
To be honest, in the history of our company, I mean, actually the bet might not have been the best bet, but everybody was convinced that we took the right decision. So we drove the whole industry to go from analog switches in the world. We took the whole world of digital switches in the 70s and took the biggest market share because these guys believed it was right. So the whole company, that's right, we go there. So it's also about that you believe in what you're doing and you take the whole group with you. I think that's investment decisions for me. Then you have a spreadsheet. I'm a financial guy. I always end up with that. But don't start with a spreadsheet.
How do you do it, Jim? I mean, do you just use your nous when you come up with these kind of assertions of, well, it's good for farming. I'm bullish on the dollar. Did you go and sit in your study and analyze something, or did you just got a few mental rules of thumb that the down sectors?
Because I noticed something. I noticed that all the farmers are old.
But do you do that yourself? Do you notice that yourself?
No,
are you reading, following up, or what?
No, I read it. I listen to BBC. I go on the computer, whatever. I make my own investment decisions. I don't really talk to other people because I get confused. I get confused talking to myself, much less to other people.
You gather your own information.
I gather my own information, and then I try to do analysis, and then I try to find some way to invest, something that's cheap, where maybe there's a change.
So it starts with an idea, and then that starts to snowball.
Or an observation. An observation.
There's a lot of noise out there, isn't there, Jim? I mean, in the data, there is so much noise. It goes up, it goes down, meaningless nonsense. But sometimes there's a systematic signal that's coming through. And what the clever people have to do is spot the difference between the noise and the underlying signal.
Usually it's just one, at least in my world, it's just one or two significant facts, and then you have to sort out the noise and figure out what to do. I mean, I was bearish on Russia for 46 years, for instance, but now I'm starting to get optimistic about Russia. Everybody hates it. Things are cheap in Russia, and in my view, there are changes taking place, but that comes from just a lot of noise, and then something breaks through the noise.
One of the things about forecasting is there's a sort of groupthink, isn't there? Maybe.
I believe that from UK
In my area.
Oh my gosh, you're gullible. I wish I'd known you 20 years ago.
No, you've got to have it in writing.
I have that.
I wanted to get towards ending this discussion, fascinating as it is. What would be each of your, when you look back over your personal forecasting, what would you say have been some of the big forecasting errors where you've said this is going to happen and it isn't going to happen?
Oh my God, my first wife. Oh, gosh, what a terrible, disastrous mistake
Professional
that
ones,
was.
Jim. Professional ones.
That affected a lot of stuff.
I can take you one from business. I think that historically we have always given out data about where the industry is going. We have always overestimated the short term, how quick technology will impact, and we have always underestimated how big it will be in long term. So we said that it's going to be, I can remember the first prediction on mobile telephony was for Sweden. We believe it's going to be 50,000 people in Sweden having a mobile phone next year. It was 20,000 and people were totally disappointed. And we thought it was going to be 200,000 forever. And it became 8 million. All of us has a phone. So I think we believe if you're so close to the technology, you always overestimate how quick it will impact, and long term you underestimate.
That is a single really very interesting observation about forecasting and the mistakes.
Constantly. So that's good. So then we can build that into our forecast.
I've been really surprised how quickly technology can develop, even really basic areas. So I don't know whether it's the fact that when we transport biomass, we need new wagons. Very fast, people bring together ideas and they make it happen. If you've got the demand, it changes with a speed that I wouldn't have necessarily known happens.
And go on, give us, Jim, you've made probably more forecasts, explicit forecasts than everybody else on this table.
We could do a whole program about my mistakes in the market. My goodness, oh my God. I've lost lots of money in my life. I'm good at it. I've lost plenty of money.
But what sort of judgments would you say you
Well, the first one that pops to mind was in 1980. I sold short oil, expecting oil prices to go down. I sold short on a Friday, and that's the weekend that Iran and Iraq went to war. So needless to say, the price of oil went straight through the roof.
Yeah.
Now, you could say that's bad luck.
That
It's
was
not
bad
bad
luck.
luck. No. Somebody knew the war was starting. You don't just snap your fingers and start a war. Somebody was moving troops, et cetera, et cetera. No, I didn't do enough homework. Every time I have lost money in the market, I would like to blame it on you. I'd like to blame it on Hans or Dorothy, but no, the broker, it's always because I haven't done enough homework.
That's an interesting reflection.
But if you want me to, I'll blame it on you in the future.
You're very, very welcome. Well, it was predictably a very interesting programme. Let me just thank my three guests, Hans Vestberg of Ericsson, Dorothy Thompson of Drax, and investor Jim Rogers. I'll be back with more guests next week.